Hello, I'm Conor Meade, and we're here today at the 2015 Canadian Science Policy Conference with Dr. Silke Nebel, who is one of our key volunteers on our program organizing committee, and also the principal of Science Action Consulting. So Silke, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the interview booth.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So why don't we start by, can you tell us a little bit about your career and your story?
Sure. So I'm a biologist by training. I have studied bird migration all my life, really. I did a master's in the Netherlands. I moved to Canada to do a PhD at Simon Fraser University. Then I moved to Australia for a postdoc before I came back to Canada to settle, really. So I've been a scientist all my life, and I do remember that even as a PhD student, I always felt that it was very hard to break out of the academic bubble. So you publish a paper, it's out there, and then that's kind of the end of it. So I found it very difficult to really translate what you have learned into something that can be used. Mm-hmm. So this is really where my interest in science policy comes from, because to me it seems like it is the ultimate tool for knowledge translation. Coming from a science perspective, this is, if you manage to influence science policy based on what you find, then to me that is a goal, one of the goals. And so at the moment I do two things. One of the things I do is I work as a research analyst for a conservation authority in London, Ontario. And so I'm part of the team that tries to solve the phosphate problem in the Great Lakes. So there's too much phosphate, and so as a consequence there is algae blooms and the water turns into a toxic soup, which is so bad that the green soup can be seen from space. So the government has decided we have to reduce phosphate by 40%, and I'm part of the team trying to figure out how this works. So to me, it's really a perfect science policy issue, because you have to identify the knowledge gaps, you have to use the science, the knowledge that you have, and try to influence a problem. But importantly, you also have to work with all the stakeholders. There's different government departments involved. There is the farmers that are, part of the problem and hopefully the solution. There are the industries that make the fertilizers. So it's a very complex issue that involves negotiating with the stakeholders and using science to come up with a policy solution. So that's a very interesting problem.
Interesting. So, as principal of Science Action Consulting, could you tell us a bit about that company, about your work, and about why you formed the company?
Sure. So about a year ago, I decided to leave research administration. I used to work in the research office at a major university in Canada, because I really wanted to focus on the interface between science and policy. So one of the issues I think that scientists have is they don't really talk to policymakers. So for scientists, it's very difficult to have their work being used by a policymaker. Mm-hmm. And likewise, a policymaker, it's extremely difficult to take the science that's out there and use it, because it's really not accessible. And by not accessible, I don't mean it's in a journal that's not open access. By not accessible, I mean it's written in a language that is very specific to the target audience, which are other scientists in the field. Mm-hmm. So unless you happen to be one of them, it's basically impossible to understand what somebody did and why. So this is really why I decided on focusing on that interface and trying to take the science that's out there and make it accessible to policymakers. And so when I worked as a grant writer, as a professional grant writer, that was kind of the perfect training, because I often had to take what somebody has written, asking for money, write a lay summary. So I really had to try to figure out what they were trying to do and why it's important, and make it so that the granting council can understand it. So it was a perfect training. And so, but I decided to now really work on things that I think are important. And so that is the science policy interface, especially in the climate change and environmental field.
Okay, interesting. So how did you get involved with the Canadian Science Policy Centre and helping organize these conferences?
So I was new to science policy, and it's kind of, you have to start somewhere. So I thought the best way to get going and meeting the people who are in the science policy field in Canada is by getting involved in the conference. Mm-hmm. And so, because you find out who is doing what and you meet other people. If you're part of the organizing team, you're like in the in-crowd kind of a little bit. So I called up Meade, the president, and I said, I asked him whether he needed any more volunteers, and he says, yes, of course, sure, please come on board. So for the past 10 months, I guess, I have been involved in organizing, working with the different panels, making sure everything is ready and good to go, choosing speakers, and so it's been a lot of fun. It's been a very good experience.
Excellent. So before we wrap up, I just want to ask for the benefit of everyone viewing, where can we go online to learn more about your work and to maybe reach out to Science to Action Consulting?
Sure, so if you are a scientist who is interested in having your work translated so a policymaker can understand it, or if you are a policymaker and you are interested in a certain field and you don't have the time to go through the literature, please call me. So my company is called Science to Action, and my website is Science to Action, it's one word with a 2.ca, and my name is Silke Nebel.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Nebel.
Thank you for having
we hope
me.
you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.